Ambassador's Personal Log, Forshim Diplomatic Corps. Classification: Restricted. My name is Judith Moonwhisper, Third Circle Ambassador to the Human Defense Coalition, and I am documenting what may be the most catastrophic intelligence failure in galactic history, not ours, theirs. The Forshims. Though I must admit, until 3 solar cycles ago, I shared their misconceptions about our peculiar allies. Let me be clear about my species' position in this conflict. The Forshim have maintained a protective alliance with humanity for exactly the reasons you might expect. We are a logical, technologically advanced race with a well-developed sense of moral obligation toward lesser species. When the human homeworld sent their first, adorably primitive radio signals into space, we felt the same protective instinct one feels toward an injured, kill-molded, small, helpless creature that inspires care, despite its obvious limitations. Responsibility. We've been protecting humanity for 2 centuries now, much like caring guardians watching over particularly creative but mentally deficient children. And truly, the humans display all the classic symptoms of cognitive impairment that we've come to recognize across dozens of primitive species. I'll be honest, we thought they were retarded. Consider their music, which consists primarily of rhythmic noise accompanied by incomprehensible vocalizations about reproduction, violence, and recreational intoxication. Or their cuisine, which appears to be based on the radical concept of applying fire to whatever organic matter happens to be available, regardless of whether it was meant to be consumed. I once witnessed a human diplomat eat something called hot wings that literally caused flames to emerge from his nasal cavity. He seemed pleased by this development. Their approach to problem-solving borders on the pathological. When faced with a malfunctioning hyperdrive, any rational species would consult technical manuals, perform diagnostic protocols, and implement systematic repairs. Humans invariably begin by striking the device with primitive tools while shouting things like, "Come on, you piece of shit." This methodology should not work. The fact that it frequently does work has been a source of ongoing confusion for our xenopsychology department. But perhaps most telling is their approach to warfare, which brings us to the current crisis. The Forshim colonial fleet represented everything that civilized galactic society finds admirable: technological sophistication, logical military doctrine, and a well-ordered social hierarchy based on demonstrated competence. When they announced their intention to pacify human space as part of their galactic expansion initiative, most of the galactic community viewed it as a mercy mission. Even we Forshim, despite our protective obligations, secretly hoped that Forshim rule might provide the stable guidance that humanity so desperately needed. The Forshim Empire had conquered 14 galaxies. Their fleet numbered over 136,000 capital ships, each one the size of a small planet, plus millions of carriers and trillions of escort vessels. They had never known defeat in over a millennium of conquest. The Forshim assessment of human military capabilities was, on the surface, entirely reasonable. Human ships appeared to be built from what could only be described as space junk. Salvaged materials, improvised components, and engineering solutions that violated every known principle of elegant design. When Forshim intelligence observed human fleet exercises, they documented tactical maneuvers that seemed designed by committee of drunken sectar, a species known for their inability to navigate in straight lines. They fight like retarded animals, Admiral Rathard observed during the pre-invasion briefing I was permitted to attend. Their largest weapons are kinetic projectiles, essentially throwing rocks at velocities that should tear their own ships apart. Their communications consist largely of profanity. Honestly, the kindest thing we can do is put them out of their misery quickly. The engagement began in the Georgia Nestor system, where humanity had chosen to make their stand. The Forshim fleet arrived in perfect formation, a technological symphony of destruction that had crushed resistance across 14 galaxies. They expected the humans to cower behind their primitive orbital fortifications around the 4th planet. Instead, something impossible happened. The humans spoke first. not through their planetary defense networks or their scattered fleet, but through a single voice that cut across all Forshim communication channels with casual authority. "This is Grand Admiral Odysseus Charles of the Human Defense Fleet," came the transmission. "I am speaking to you from the bridge of the battleship Indomitable Will." The Forshim reaction was immediate and explosive. The voice was unmistakably male, deep, resonant, carrying the confidence of absolute command. But that was impossible. In Forshim society, males were breeding stock, weak creatures whose only purpose was reproduction before inevitable death. They didn't command fleets. They didn't even leave the breeding colonies. "Impossible!" Admiral Rathart's voice roared across the fleet communications. "Males cannot command, males cannot fight, males cannot lead. What perversion is this?" "Nevertheless," Admiral Charles replied with maddening calm, "here I am, and you are about to lose your first capital ship in 1,000 years to forces under my command." What happened next shattered everything the Forshim thought they knew about warfare. The empty gas giant erupted. What had appeared to be a lifeless world revealed itself as a massive weapon platform. A beam of coherent energy, wider than most Forshim destroyers and blazing with the intensity of a newborn star, lanced out from the planet's depths. It struck the capital ship Mother's Wrath. The planet-sized vessel, protected by adaptive armor that had never failed in a millennium of warfare, simply exploded. 9 billion Forshim warriors died in an instant, their deaths marking the first time in over 1,000 years that the Forshim had lost anything larger than a scout vessel. But that was only the beginning. The asteroid field came alive. What the Forshim had dismissed as navigational hazards revealed themselves as the most sophisticated ambush zone in galactic history. 50 billion craft burst from concealment, 1.2 billion human fighters accompanied by their drone wingmen, plus 744 million bombers. Each human pilot controlled 26 additional automated craft through some form of neural interface the Forshim had never encountered. The mathematics were staggering. The humans weren't just outnumbered, they had deliberately concealed force strength that dwarfed most sector fleets. "First Mother, preserve us!" I heard one Forshim officer whisper as the tactical displays filled with hostile contacts. "They've been planning this for decades." The human attack came in waves of surgical precision. Their bombers targeted specific systems, reactor housings, shield generators, carrier launch bays. With intelligence that spoke to detailed study of Forshim ship designs. Each torpedo strike was calculated for maximum psychological impact as well as physical damage. But it was the fighters that truly demonstrated human tactical brilliance. They didn't try to win dogfights against superior Forshim interceptors. Instead, they used their drone escorts to create defensive screens while systematically destroying the infrastructure that allowed the Forshim fleet to function. Communication arrays, sensor networks, weapons targeting systems, all of it carved away with railgun fire and missile strikes. "They're not fighting to win individual battles," Admiral Charles explained during one of his periodic tactical briefings that the humans broadcast across all channels. "They are fighting to cripple your ability to coordinate responses. Every system we destroy makes you less effective as a unified force." The Forshim response was predictable, rage-fueled charges that played directly into human tactical planning. When Admiral Rathard ordered the fleet to advance at maximum speed toward the human positions, she was doing exactly what the humans wanted. The Forshim formation dissolved into individual ship actions as fury overrode military discipline. "All vessels, emergency acceleration," Rathard commanded. "Close to point-blank range. No male will claim victory over the daughters of the First Mother." But the humans had prepared for this, too. As the Forshim fleet charged through the inner system, they triggered the next phase of their plan. The asteroids began to move. Thousands of rocks that should have been inert chunks of stone and metal suddenly ignited, massive thruster arrays. The humans had weaponized an entire asteroid belt, turning each rock into a kinetic weapon capable of devastating any ship it struck. But more than that, the moving asteroids collided with stationary ones in carefully choreographed patterns, creating expanding debris fields that channeled the Forshim fleet into predetermined killing zones. "They're reshaping the entire battlefield," one of my tactical advisors observed with growing horror. "This isn't just a military engagement. It's a demonstration of engineering capabilities that exceed our understanding of what's possible." The Forshim fleet was being systematically dismantled. Capital ships that had conquered galaxies died under concentrated bomber assault. Carriers were eliminated before they could deploy their fighter screens. The pride of the Forshim military vessels carrying tens of billions of warriors became expanding clouds of debris and radiation. And still Admiral Charles spoke with the calm authority of someone conducting a training exercise. "This concludes my final offer of honorable surrender," he announced, as fresh formations of human bombers emerged from hidden supply caches within the asteroid belt. "If you choose to continue this engagement, you will discover that humans are masters of what we call asymmetric warfare." The humans had stockpiled ammunition for 17 additional strikes of the magnitude the Forshim had already experienced. The devastating attack that had crippled the most powerful fleet in galactic history had been conducted with the bomber's initial ammunition loads. Admiral Rathart's response was predictable. "We will never surrender to diseased male creatures. We would rather die to the last warrior than accept terms from abominations like you." "Then I am afraid you will do exactly that," Admiral Charles replied with ominous certainty. The final phase began when the Forshim made their desperate charge toward the system's primary star, hoping to reach the human fleet before their weapons failed completely. The humans had maneuvered them into sustained combat that degraded Forshim equipment faster than it could be repaired. Plasma cannons overheating, ammunition reserves depleted, thermal management systems failing. It was then that the humans revealed their ultimate weapon. The innermost planet, dismissed as a barren rock scorched by stellar radiation, suddenly blazed with energy signatures that dwarfed anything in the Forshim database. Geometric patterns of light spread across its surface as the entire world revealed itself as a massive technological construct. A section of the planet's surface split apart like the petals of a mechanical flower. From within emerged something that defied every assumption about weapons technology, a projectile the size of a capital ship, brilliantly energized and accelerating at velocities that approached the speed of light. "Massive projectile detected," came panicked transmissions from across the Forshim fleet. "It's heading directly for the star." The weapon struck the red dwarf's corona with the force of a directed supernova. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, Admiral Charles' voice crackled across the communications one final time. "To those who are about to die, we salute you." The star began to collapse in ways that violated fundamental principles of stellar physics. The humans had somehow developed technology capable of artificially inducing stellar detonation, turning the system's primary star into a weapon. The Forshim fleet had perhaps minutes to escape before the expanding wavefront of stellar destruction sterilized everything in the system. But the humans had planned for that, too. The same dimensional distortions that accompanied their unknown FTL technology made hyperspace jumps impossible within the affected area. The human fleet simply vanished, their ships departing through some form of faster-than-light travel that bore no resemblance to conventional hyperspace drives. Even their fighters made independent FTL transitions, something that should have been impossible for crafts smaller than cruiser-class vessels. They left behind only their automated drones, programmed to ensure that any Forshim survivors would not live to carry word of what humanity had become. The stellar explosion, when it came, was visible across neighboring star systems. The red dwarf that had burned steadily for billions of years died in nuclear fire, its artificial detonation creating an expanding sphere of destruction that consumed every world in the system. Of the 136,495 capital ships that had entered the Georgia Nestor system, carrying crews that numbered in the trillions, none survived. The most powerful military force in galactic history had been utterly annihilated by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. In the aftermath, as I drafted my report to the Forshim High Council, I found myself reconsidering everything we thought we knew about our human ally, their apparent cognitive limitations, their chaotic social structures, their seemingly primitive technology. None of it was what it appeared to be. The humans weren't retarded. They were camouflaged. Every aspect of their civilization that we had interpreted as evidence of primitive thinking was actually a form of strategic deception. Their chaotic communications weren't the result of poor organization. They were a deliberate code system that sounded like profanity to outsiders. Their apparently primitive technology wasn't the result of inferior engineering. It was a conscious decision to hide advanced capabilities behind crude-looking exteriors. "How long?" I asked Admiral Charles during our post-battle diplomatic meeting. "How long have you been planning this?" The human admiral smiled with the kind of expression that predators reserve for prey that has finally understood its situation. "Ambassador," he said, "we've been preparing for galactic conflict since the day we invented the telescope and realized we weren't alone. Everything you've observed about human civilization has been designed to ensure that when someone finally decided to test us, they would learn a very important lesson about the dangers of underestimating tool using apes. With access to stellar engineering, the revelation that humanity had been conducting a centuries-long deception operation was almost as shocking as their stellar manipulation capability. They had deliberately cultivated an image of primitive incompetence while secretly developing military technology that exceeded anything in galactic civilization. "The duct tape?" I asked weakly. "Actually works really well for temporary repairs," Admiral Charles replied. "But mostly we use it because it makes people think our technology is held together with primitive materials. Nobody expects a ship that looks like a flying junkyard to be carrying weapons that can crack planets." The profanity-filled communications. Code phrases. Every curse word corresponds to specific tactical instructions. It's actually a very efficient communication protocol, but it sounds like chaos to anyone who doesn't know the system. As I compiled my final report, I included a personal recommendation that the Forshim High Council immediately upgrade our alliance with humanity from protective guardianship to strategic partnership between equals. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that rendered our protective services not just unnecessary but potentially insulting. My final recommendation was that the galactic community approach humanity with the kind of respect typically reserved for species that could destroy star systems on a whim, because it turned out they actually could. The humans had spent 2 centuries allowing us to think of them as adorably primitive allies who needed our protection. In reality, they were a post-technological civilization that had deliberately chosen to appear primitive while secretly preparing for galactic warfare. They had mocked our assumptions about their tools, our confidence in our superiority, and our belief that we understood their capabilities. Then they exploded a star. I suspect that history will remember this as the moment when the galaxy learned a very important lesson about the dangers of underestimating species that evolved on death worlds and learned to make tools before they learned to make peace. The humans are still our allies, but we are no longer their protectors. We are their very respectful neighbors who have learned not to make assumptions about what they're capable of accomplishing with a roll of duct tape and a sufficiently motivated engineering team. End log. Ambassador Jutet Moonwhisper was subsequently promoted to Chief Diplomatic Liaison for Human-Forshim Relations, a position that now requires security clearance equivalent to strategic weapons information. His memoirs, "I Thought They Were Retarded: A Diplomat's Guide to Human Deception," became required reading at the Galactic Diplomatic Academy and contributed to the establishment of new protocols for evaluating primitive species' actual capabilities. The Forshim colonial fleet's defeat marked the end of their 1,000-year expansion across 14 galaxies. The surviving Forshim territories issued formal apologies and have since become some of humanity's most cautious neighbors, citing the humans' innovative approach to conflict resolution as inspiration for their own diplomatic modernization programs. Humanity continues to present itself as a chaotic, primitive species that happened to get lucky against a technologically superior enemy. Galactic intelligence agencies are no longer fooled by this presentation, but they have learned to appreciate the humans' commitment to maintaining their cover story. The Georgia Nestor system has been designated as a memorial site. The expanding nebula created by the weaponized star serves as a reminder that tool-using Deathworld species should never be underestimated, regardless of how primitive their duct tape makes them appear. The perpetual flow of energy from the star. Many thanks to my channel members and Pathfinders. You all make these videos possible. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Video shares, memberships, and super thanks help the channel grow as well, so feel free to partner with this channel in that way as we grow. With that all said, thank you again for listening to the story, and thank you for your time. On the left side of your screen are some videos I think you might be interested in. I hope to see you in the next one.